Hello and welcome to an introduction into penetration testing. At first, I'm going to give you an overview about what penetration testing actually is. I'm going to present you some tools that will make your life as a penetration tester easier. I'm going to show you some important vulnerabilities that you should look for during your penetration test. We're going to look into how a penetration testing report looks like, and in the end I'm going to give you some more resources to dive deeper into the topic. Okay, so what actually is penetration testing? Think about it like this. If you were a police officer and someone asks you, is my building secure? You would put yourself into the perspective of a burglar and try to find out how the burglar might get into the house. Would they use the front door or the windows? And then you would check whether these attack vectors are properly secured. The same principle works for penetration testing. The company owner pays a hacker basically some money, and then they are going to attack their company servers. Of course, they make sure not to cause any harm, like bring the servers down, but instead they will report all the information they found during their attack and give it back to the owner so that they can improve their security. Basically, it's a structured approach of finding vulnerabilities in systems, and the goal is to find any vulnerabilities. It usually involves network attacks, although in some cases one could also use other, like a USB interface, or get the data from the internal storage, or actually try to get into the building to test the perimeter security, or that can be part of a penetration test. So why would a company actually do a penetration test? The first reason could be compliance. So, for example, the PCI DSS standard, which is used for companies that process credit card data, mandates a yearly penetration test to ensure that the data, the credit card data, is properly secured on your company's servers. The second reason could be customer trust. So, of course, if the customers of your customers read in the newspapers that their data was stolen once again, they will have less trust in your company and might shop somewhere else. A third reason could be to verify your system security. Of course, you don't want some enemy of yours to hack into your servers, delete all data, and bring down all your systems to end your business. And another reason could be to train your own staff for cyber attacks. So, of course, you would tell them before that there's a penetration test, or there will be a penetration test ongoing, so that they don't shut down all your servers once they realize in panic that someone broke into your servers and now has access to it. Okay, if you're doing a penetration test, a simple view of the process would look like this. There are 3 steps involved. The first one would be to scan the target system to find out if there are any open ports that can be used for attacking, which services and daemons are running, maybe an outdated version or something like that. Then you would exploit any vulnerabilities you have found and use those elevated permissions on the system to start over to find more servers in the network. So, for example, if at first you only succeed to hack into an unimportant computer, so like a Raspberry Pi that's used to show some advertisement on a billboard or something like that, but that's in the company network, you could use that computer to gain access to more computers in the same network because it might have elevated permissions in contrast to computers on the internet. Yeah, so what skills would you need as a penetration tester? First of all, network protocol basics. So as I said, most penetration tests are actually done through a network. There are some tests that might use other vectors, but mostly you would need to know about network protocols, how they work, where you could change some settings in order to find out information about the system. All that stuff could be important for you as a penetration tester. Although, of course, you are going to have some tools that will help you, you still need to have an understanding about what these tools do. Another thing that you should be aware of is security technology. So like a firewall or intrusion detection systems or a malware scanner. All those systems could get into the way of you trying to break into a system. So you need to know how do those systems work, where are their weaknesses, how you might circumvent them. Thirdly, you need to have an understanding about the used operating system. So to exploit Windows computers, you're going to use a very different approach from attacking Linux systems. And also most penetration testers use some kind of Linux operating systems as a system to attack other devices. So you would need to know how to use that as well. And lastly, of course, you are going to have knowledge about some common attacks in order to know where to start, how to attack the first device. This is all information that can be learned, but you need to know as a penetration tester. Okay, now I'm going to talk about some tools that will be valuable for you as a penetration tester. The first one is actually a tool set and not a single tool. It's Kali Linux. It's an operating system. To be precise, it's a Debian-derived Linux distribution, and it's designed specifically for penetration testing and digital forensics. So with that in mind, it has over 600 pre-installed programs that can be used or are very useful for these purposes. It's also available for the Windows subsystem for Linux, but usually you would use it in a virtual machine for security reasons and also to make the configuration easier. The second tool would be Nmap, which on the surface is a port scanner, but it has much more functionality. For example, it can be used to detect services and their versions, which operating system is in use. It has a whole lot of plugins and scripts that can be used to extend the functionality. And of course it uses some special network packets to gain that information. On the screenshot here you can see Zenmap, which is the official graphical user interface for Nmap, and you can see the important information that Nmap has found about the target system there. So for example, which ports are open, the entire log output, which services were detected, or in case you were doing an entire network scan, you could see a map of the network. So it's incredibly useful for a first overview of the target network when you're starting your penetration test. The second one is now called Greenbone Security. Formerly it was called OpenVAS, which in turn was formerly called GNessus, which was a fork of Nessus, which now is a paid program, but all those forks still stayed free, so you can use it for free. It's open source, and what it does is it scans a target system or target systems for known vulnerabilities and presents them for you, so you know which vulnerabilities to use to attack the system further. Next, we have Wireshark. Wireshark actually is not really a penetration testing tool. It's more of a network protocol debugging tool. So what it does is it records all traffic on a network. It can pass virtually any protocol that you would use on your computer. Most known protocols can be directly passed in Wireshark, and you can see all the information that's included in all those network packets. So if you use an application that communicates with another device or a cloud, for example, you could use Wireshark to tap into that communication, see if any credentials are revealed, what technology is used for communication, and maybe use that to find any weaknesses in the communication that can be used to take over the device. For example, some smart devices had a known vulnerability in their software updating process because they used some weak cryptography. This meant that someone could use their own server basically to imitate the cloud and install their own software packet on the target device without any user interaction required. So it can be very useful for some sophisticated attacks. Then we have Hashcat. It's marketed as a password recovery tool. So it's a password cracker basically. It's a very fast one. It's also available as GPU accelerated versions, which use your graphic cards, because those have some properties that make it very good in contexts where parallel computing is used, like password cracking. So it can be sped up by a few orders of magnitude. And one of the benefits of using this tool is that it has hundreds of different hashing algorithms available. So no matter what hashing algorithm was used, it's probably in there. Next we have Burp Suite. This is used for web application security. The first step of Burp would be to crawl a website. So it checks for any links in the home page basically, or any other known pages that are used often. And you set to find all other pages on the web interface. And once that is done, it can use that information to try and attack the web application. For example, it's able to carry out brute force attacks, which I'm going to talk about more later, cross-site scripting, and SQL injection. All of this that you will hear more about later. Then we have Metasploit. Metasploit is a framework for exploits. It can exploit more than, I think, 4,000 vulnerabilities. It can also use that vulnerability to start a shell, for example, to copy files or do anything else. And it uses open source contributions for the exploits and payloads. So it's extended very often. What you see here in the screenshot is a very old version of the web interface for the free community edition. I think the web interface is now only available for the paid version, but you can also use it on the command line. Okay, so since as a penetration tester you need to attack systems, you need to know about vulnerabilities that can be used to attack those systems. So now I'm going to present some of the most common vulnerabilities to you. The first one is kind of obvious, but still successful in a lot of cases, surprisingly actually. So of course, if you use 12345 as the root password for your server, it's going to be hacked very quickly. So how does that work? An attacker would use a brute force attack, which is very simple. They use a list of common passwords, which is called a word list, and they would try those passwords against your server one after the other, and if one matches, well, they have found the right password. A very simple attack. Of course, some systems have defenses against such attacks. For example, after 5 wrong password attempts, you have to wait 10 minutes to try the next one, which of course slows down such an attack very much. The second classic vulnerability would be outdated software. Well, as you know, there are sometimes security updates for software which solve vulnerabilities in the code, which could be used to do something malicious with the software. And those vulnerabilities get assigned a number, and there are online databases of the vulnerabilities and which software version they were solved in. So you can just check on the internet if the software you're using and the specific version is vulnerable to any exploits which are known already. And a lot of systems are still running old software, as you know, and this is also successful in a lot of cases. Next we have insecure protocols publicly available. So some protocols are only designed to be used in an internal network, which is kind of secure, but they don't have any authentication built in, or it's possible to disable it. And still some people manage to put those systems directly on the internet. So as you can see here on this screenshot, I have used a search engine called Shodan to search for SMB servers with no authentication on the internet. And you can just connect to those servers from your computer and browse through all the files that are available there. And it's actually not really a vulnerability. It's more misconfiguration, but nonetheless you can still use it as a penetration tester. Then we have social engineering. This doesn't contain a lot of hacking, network security or computer science. It's basically targeting humans. In this example, no, people don't do any incredibly smart programming to find any backdoors on the spot, but they would just call the company and maybe they won't ask them for their password, but a more sophisticated attack would actually be successful. I have 2 examples here for you. The first one is Twitter. They have been hacked earlier this year, I think in July, and some very prominent Twitter accounts have been taken over by attackers and were tweeting about some Bitcoin scam or something like that. And as it turned out, someone used a coordinated social engineering attack against Twitter employees who have access to all Twitter accounts, basically, and yeah, used that to take over these famous accounts. Yeah, another one here is a government in the USA which was scammed for 1.7 million US dollar. Someone just sends them an invoice claiming to be a contractor for a local school, and yeah, they paid it, and that person was 1.7 million richer. So yeah, if you're smart enough, such attacks can work. Next we have SQL injection. Yeah, I have a kind of famous comic here, which is from XKCD. The lady here gets a phone call from the school of her son. Yeah, and she named her son Robert. Yeah, drop table students and some special characters. And yeah, the joke here is if such a name would be inserted into an SQL query without sanitizing the input first, as you can see here, first name would be replaced by Robert drop table students. And yeah, what this does is it inserts into the students table a new student named Robert Smith, and then as the next query it would delete all entries in the student table and drop the table entirely, so all student data would be lost. Yeah, what could be done with such an attack? Of course, you could delete data, which as a penetration tester you wouldn't do. The same for a denial of service attack, you wouldn't do that as well. But you could use it to gain system information, read any data from the database or files on the file system. So if you find such a vulnerability, it can be incredibly useful because you get a lot of information about the system. A similar attack is cross-site scripting, or XSS. Yeah, in this case, some malicious input is inserted into HTML. So in this example, someone entered this here, script source evil.com, as their search term, and the resulting web page would just put that in there, the script loaded and executed in the context of that website. If they would send the link of that search to anyone, they would be the victim of a cross-site scripting attack. Their cookies could be stolen, or any requests could be made in the context of the website. The possible damage could be to steal user sessions, to deface the website, to put some content there that the owner of the website wouldn't want to be on that website, or even to spread malware. Okay, so let's talk about penetration testing reports. Why is it important to have a report for your penetration test? Of course, your client, the customer, only sees the report as the result of your penetration test, and all the hard work you put in finding clever ways to get into a system and checking all the vulnerabilities. In the end, they don't see what work you've done, so you have to write a summary for them detailing all the work you did and what you found. So how would such a report look like? At first you would give a summary, then talk about the project details, target information, detail your findings, give recommendations about what they should fix, and maybe add an appendix with all the logs and graphs or something you found. So yeah, let's go through this one by one. The summary, of course, summarizes your result. It should be as concise as possible, only a few paragraphs, and it shouldn't include too much technical details. Yeah, all the details should be in the chapters after that. And then the project details. Yes, so you should write about the scope of your penetration test, so which servers you should actually check or which devices, which tools you have used, with which methods, and the time frame you have worked on. So yeah, it's basically a narration of what you did. Think about it like writing a newspaper article about your work. Then you're going to add some target information. So yeah, you can list all the servers or devices that you've checked, their location, their software version, IP addresses, logs, running system, whatever. You can put that in there, maybe as a table or something like that. Yeah, then your findings, so the vulnerabilities you have found. Yeah, it should be a structured list, so ideally a table. So you list the affected software, the details of the vulnerability, and the risk it intends. So yeah, one of those 4x4 risk matrices might be used. So on one side you have the probability of the vulnerability being exploited, and on the other side you have the impact it would have on your system. So for example, a rare vulnerability could be in a software like SSH, which is known to be very secure. There are only very little vulnerabilities known in that software. But if they have SSH access, they have access to your entire system. So it might be called critical and rare, which means it's a moderate risk. On the other side, if you use Telnet, which doesn't encrypt the connection at all, this would be more likely to be exploited, and yeah, it would be as critical, so that might even be a high or extreme vulnerability. Then you would add some recommendations. So yeah, which vulnerabilities should be fixed immediately? Yeah, how can the company work to fix the issue for good? Maybe they can add some general firewall rules to make it impossible to exploit vulnerabilities like that, or maybe they just have to update their software. And what precautions should the company take to prevent such a vulnerability from happening in the future? Okay, so if you want to become a penetration tester, it might be helpful to have a certification that proves your knowledge in the field of penetration testing. One would be the Certified Penetration Testing Professional by EC Council, and also one of the better is Offensive Security's OSCP. They are the vendor of Kali Linux. So yeah, if you want to train your penetration testing skills, there are some online services like Hack the Box, Virtual Hacking Labs, and Pentester Lab. They basically give you access to some machines that are vulnerable to exploits and give you the task of trying to hack those machines. So basically simulate a penetration testing job. I would recommend Hack the Box because there's a free version available. It's very easy to set up, and yeah, let me show you how it works. Okay, so once you're logged in, this is what it looks like. Yeah, you have a guide on how to set up the VPN connection that makes it possible to connect to the machines that they provide. And yeah, let's take a look at the machine lab here. So as you can see, you have a lot of different machines available. Yeah, they provide a difficulty rating, which is done by the users. So yeah, this should be one of the easier ones. And yeah, you can see the operating system, yeah, which skills are required. And yeah, also you can see how long it took the first people to hack those machines. To conclude this presentation, here are 3 of the key points you should remember about penetration testing. First, penetration testing is just hacking with the permission of the owner. The goal is to detect any vulnerabilities, and there are some specialized tools that can help you in the process. Okay, some questions that you should be able to answer. First, what's the difference between penetration testing and hacking? Why would a business pay someone for penetration testing? How can social engineering attacks be prevented? And why are certifications so important in this business? Thank you for watching. I hope you liked this presentation.